So the myth that my group is evaluating is that the colonists wanted independence from Great Britain. What did you learn about this topic that could contradict this myth?
Alright, so stuff that I learned that might contradict towards this myth is the stamp acts that the British, the Parliament, they put onto the colonists. The first one being the Sugar Act, or the Molasses Act, where they were taxed when they brought ships aboard onto England. And this act basically taxed the American colonists, which they did not agree on. And I guess some historians could say this is like one of the starting points or the triggering actions that could have led the U.S. to wanting to be free from Great Britain. Also, stuff that we learned was when that tax was repealed, the Stamp Act, which put a tax on any documents, that as well showed another way why the colonists wanted to gain their independence. But we learned that the British, they really didn't want to be independent, but what they really wanted was to gain their British rights, which they had as British citizens.
So they wanted their British rights even though they were in a completely different continent or country.
Yes, because they had been taken from Britain to be colonists or to settle into a different world or new country.
Okay. So what was the most interesting thing you learned about this topic?
The most interesting thing that I learned the most crazy thing that I learned was like the violent protests that the colonists had towards these acts. Well, I guess anyone would act violently towards these acts, but these acts involve death and destroying property of the U.S. Like the people who enforce these tax on them. Also, they would do such things as tar people. The tax collectors, what they would do, they would strip them naked, put feathers on them, and put tar over them. These were violent acts, and they showed that the colonists they would get whatever they wanted, and that British Parliament had no right to tax them. That was probably the most interesting that I learned in that class.
So basically, the colonists could get away with anything with violence, basically, what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. So do you think that this myth, instead of it actually being false, it could be actually true that they did want independence from Great Britain?
As we know, this myth is false, but I guess yes, it could be true in some ways. And these protests showed the ways that why the colonists want to be false. But a way that this myth is false because, as we know that further throughout the timeline, we see that the American colonists, they start to have their first Continental Congress, where they established the idea that they are going to boycott their goods on the British laws. And then they had a second one where they had a petition to King George to say that we still want to be loyal to you, but we just want for you to give us our British rights. So I guess that is why the British thought that they didn't want to be fully independent from Britain, but just wanted the British rights.
You're talking about the First Continental Congress. So during the First Continental Congress, they said that they didn't want peace, correct?
Yes.
That they were just gonna boycott them and just keep boycotting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why do you think that why do you think that they didn't start the army sooner than they did when they actually started?
First reason being because Georgia, the one state that didn't attend that, meaning that they didn't have full consent of all the colonies, and also because they still wanted to be loyal to King George III, and their problem was toward Parliament and not King George III. So they thought by sending a petition towards him that maybe he could talk to Parliament and maybe say that, oh, can you tell Parliament to not put these taxes towards us? And I guess that's why they didn't start the army sooner, because they felt that they still had a chance at stopping these laws happening.
We have already learned that this myth is busted. Why do you think that when we were younger they kept this information from us and they told us that they did want independence?
I guess they kept this information from us because as we know it, many of us believed when we were young that United States was a country and we never knew how it came from. And then I guess knowing that it came from the British, I guess would like have us make us contradict and have us like not maybe have a bunch of questions and question it, but maybe like regard to how the U.S. like why did they protest for Britain? As students, maybe we wouldn't be able to comprehend all of these taxes. And also maybe another reason being why, because the United States was a great nation. I guess they didn't want to state the main historians to keep that away from us, because they want to say the U.S. was a great country, and then due to patriotism, they want to keep little to none, showing that U.S. had like struggles within their formation of the United States.
Okay, so Why do you think, since these historians, let's just say, they kept this information from us, do you think that they might be because of them not wanting us to question about their history that supposedly is true to them?
Yes, because many history books are biased, showing that U.S. is very like patriotic, and I guess they don't show the other side of the coin where U.S. had flaws and where they had originated from problems. Because we just want to show that one side of the U.S., showing that we're just like a strong U.S. government and we're like number one.
What was one thing that Mr. Anderson had said to you guys that was like made you confused about this topic about America wanting
Just the
independence?
protests, as the many colonies they came together to form this protest, but then he still said that they were disunited in many ways, that they didn't want to they didn't want independence from Britain, which made me very confused, because I thought that by Parliament putting these taxes on them, maybe that they would want an idea, or maybe just like take more action to seek independence from Great Britain. And that just confused me, because so much violence happened just to show that the U.S. The colonies still wanted to seek the loyalty to Great Britain.
Okay. Can you explain more about the Second Continental Congress and what happened?
Oh yes, in the Second Continental Congress, what happened was a battle between Lexington and Concord, where the British, they marched into the towns of Lexington and Concord, and fed up colonists were ready to take arms against these British people due to the tax collectors that they were doing on them. And I guess from women and children, they took arms against them, but they were put down by the British Army. And the leaders of the U.S. Continental Congress thought that they needed to again regroup, talk about it. And I guess that's where they came up with the petition, where they wanted to go to King George for King George to talk to Parliament to say that maybe we should rethink these laws, and that maybe that we should grant these U.S. citizens their rights as British people.
When they sent this, what happened to the petition? Was the petition successful or not?
The petition was not successful. King George ignored it, and this is like a starting point of why the U.S. wanted to get their independence, because it was rejected from King George, who they wanted to remain loyal to.
Okay, so they were loyal to Britain and King George until he rejected the olive branch petition?
Until it was rejected.
Okay.
Also, another reason why they didn't want to be independent was because they had no strong form of government. They barely had militiamen, which was not strong enough, and they knew if they were to take arms against Great Britain, they would need to seek foreign help. And also, as we know, British was like one of the strongest naval armies, so they wouldn't be able to take them down single-handedly. I guess that's why the U.S. colonies were too small of a country, I guess, to take down a big British army.
So that's why they feared of going independent, because of
that was the primary reason, but maybe that's one of the reasons why they hesitated at that idea to seek independence.
Okay. So basically, that the colonists you're saying that the colonists didn't want independence at all. Do you think that there might have been some people at the colonies that did want independence and didn't want to be part of Britain?
Yes. As we know, these were called the Patriots and the Loyalists. Well, these Patriots, they wanted to take independence from them, but since Benjamin in the Albany Congress, Benjamin Franklin brought the idea of the colonies being united and maybe seeking independence, but some of them thought because they weren't going to gain much independence, which is why they didn't want to join the idea of seeking for independence, which also led to the idea of disunity between all the colonies. All right, so pretty much what sums up the idea is that your myth was false, as you know, and the stuff that we learned was another reason why they didn't want full independence were groups, partially why they wanted to get independence were groups that formed, as you know, the Sons of Liberty, who were protests against Parliament, and also the Paxton Boys, which were a group of leaders which fought in the Pontiac's Rebellion. I guess these groups showed a sign that that they want to gain independence from, or not gain independence, but to show that they should have the rights as British citizens.
All right, and thank you for that interview.
Oh, you're welcome.